Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Susan Benjamin SDSA, and today I am so pleased to welcome set decorator Andrew McCarthy, also SDSA, and production designer Deborah Riley, many affiliations, to discuss their creative collaboration on the Netflix hit series, Three Body Problem. And I have a really important question to start with, and that is, when is season 2 coming? I just love season 1, and I need to know when season 2 is coming.
If only we knew.
Andrew, had you read the books before you were asked to come on board?
To be honest, no, I hadn't. I mean, I was in Hungary doing a project there, and Deb got hold of me and said, listen, I've got this thing. We had a little chat, and I was like, this sounds like the most bizarre, crazy, different project that I ever heard in my life. Even when I was on the project and people asked me, what is the job about? I find it really difficult to try and explain it. So no, I mean, I have to admit, at the time, no, I had not read it. Obviously did when we got into it, and yeah, I mean, it was obviously mind-blowing.
Did you search out Andrew in particular because you had worked together, or for this project in particular because you had done Game of Thrones together, or you had done other projects?
There was enough in it that seemed like it would be a really great project for somebody who's really interested in the nuts and bolts of the way things work, which was one of the things that this project really required. You know, there was a big scientific element, the big historical element as well. You know, it needed somebody who had the appropriate amount of rigor that would go with it. And Andrew was my guy. And honestly, I would never have made it through without him. It's as simple as that.
We shot for roughly about 185 days, and we had about 174 sets. So that's basically a set a day. It is when you start putting into that kind of context, and it wasn't small little things. We were doing big sets, and some of the sets which you would normally do on a normal big feature film, you know, normally you'd be sitting there shooting that for like 3 weeks a month, and we would set these things up 6 weeks, and we would shoot for 2 days and gone. And it's like, what? And now you're on to the next thing.
It sounds like you had a wonderful collaboration, and you know, Deb, I just can't even tell you. I don't even know how you would start to think about this. When you got the call, did you read the books and then read the script, or you read the script and then you went back to the books?
I wasn't aware of the books at all until they said that this was going to be their next project. And so, you know, I bought the trilogy and I was reading the first book. And I just thought to myself, I don't have no idea how this will translate to screen, because it's so dense and so scientific, and it lurches from, you know, history to future and I had no idea how the guys would pull it off. However, it was epic in the way that Game of Thrones had been epic. So I thought, okay, well, this fits in a sense. Like, I could understand why it appealed to them. When I started delving into Three Body Problem, what is my task was really to take what's science fiction and turn it into sort of science fact, if you know what I mean, to make it really grounded so that an audience should never question the science that we're trying to propose. For that, we needed to do a lot of research, and it required a lot of Andrew and I to make the science convincing enough that you could believe that, you know, you could slice through ships with nanofibers, or that, you know, that there are these aliens coming or whatever. So that's where we really had to rely on design and research and our consultants that we used as well to help us with that. So Andrew and I were thrown in the deep end.
But you did ground it in a way that somebody like me who does glaze over, I was so into it and I was following along. I really felt like, oh, I am getting this. And I was so proud of myself, you know, and really, you set it up so well, all of you, because when we were in the lab with the diamond slicer and I saw the way it broke, then I really understood what it was that you were talking about. So I wanted to know, you know, how did you go about creating that piece in particular? And then Andrew, to create a whole nanoscience lab, I thought I was so there. It was amazing.
It was an old Pfizer laboratory. Remember
That's
that?
right. It really was.
Oh, wow.
A completely abandoned Pfizer laboratory.
It was starting from the ground up. I mean, go and get every piece of furniture, or every piece of tech that's in here, and seeing it all.
So this is the location as Andrew was given it, and there's no equipment left in there whatsoever.
In terms of the location, it was at least a good start to work from. I mean, the space was beautiful. There was beautiful light coming in from both directions. But yeah, to make it feel like a lab, a place that people have been working for a long time, and lots of people there. Obviously, it's just the layers and layers of stuff that you have to kind of find and bring in and all that.
But we first had to design the diamond cutter itself. And as Andrew was saying, we used a consultant by the name of Matthew Kenzie, and he's a particle physicist who works at CERN. And the main principal idea that this diamond cutter had to prove was that the nanofibers themselves would remain static, and that piece of solid diamond would move through those fibers in order to cut it. And therefore, what we were setting up in episode 2, what you would later see in episode 5, when the ship has to, sail through those static fibers.
So moving on to that scene, just because it ties in. So where did you shoot the Panama Canal?
We started at Dorney Court when we were beside the lake there. And then we had a deck that was built in the car park at Shepparton. And then we had some corridors, which we can all go through this in depth, that was built on stage in Shepparton. We had the executive corridor and we had a public corridor. And we had Mike Evans' death staircase as well. And then we had an enormous set of all of the destruction too. So that was a massive build as well. So it went through all various stages.
How did you even start with that? Because for me, who actually thought about, well, we're going to cut these little, cutouts, how we're going to take a backpack and cut that in half. How did you figure out how to tell this story visually without actually having to slice all the walls?
It's like having an invisible force kind of coming through this whole ship, and no one can see what it is. So if it's slicing a wall, you don't see it slicing a wall because it's obviously so microscopic. But when it hits anything that has that's obviously fighting or suspending against gravity, it's obviously going to fall. So, I mean, this took, Deb, I don't know how many meetings.
Endless.
We were like continuously trying to work out how far are fibers apart from each other, when they come through a ship, what's going to happen. We were speaking to structural engineers. How do things force and how do ships, literally how ships are built together and what the internal ribbing does and how to keep it together. And when you start slicing that, what does that do? We wanted to try and keep a lot of things in camera as much as we could. So then it comes into that whole thing going, well, what can we do in order to put dressing on walls? And like Deb was saying before, we've got so many different layers of the ship where if it's where families live or if it's executive level, continuously trying to think of these little gags that we could keep playing with. And again, you cut a clock in half, you cut a pipe in half, what's going to happen? Is it steam? Does the water come out? But at the same time, you got to think about resets because we're doing this in camera. So we can't spend another half a day trying to put everything back. So that was the next challenge.
I have to ask you about this game mask because, oh my gosh, it's just fantastic.
It's a beauty.
It is a beauty. And, I always think it's easier to do sets from the past. You have research, hopefully, that you can conjure. But if you're creating something in the future, what is that? Because we haven't seen it yet. So Yeah. So how did you begin with that?
We had a lot of reference material of early versions of VR technology. And, we were looking at some stuff from NASA, and I was doing a lot of concept work with one of our artists. But it became abundantly clear very quickly that our showrunners weren't interested in any of that research. They didn't want anything that in any way referenced anything that existed already. You just couldn't understand it in the present day whatsoever. It wasn't to have any jacks, any cables, anything that would give you any hint of how the VR world was projected. There was no power source. There was nothing. And the beautiful boxes that they were given to the gamers in as well, with their names embossed on the top. It was a beautiful package. And the mirror finish was very contentious, but for a book reader, it's obvious why it needs to be a mirror. But you can imagine how much visual effects just hated me, because obviously when they put on the headset, it reflected, the camera, the lights, the rest of the crew, everybody. So every time you see a headset, think of all the additional work that went into it. And then I got into so much trouble, and Andrew will remember this, when then in Wade's office, we had that mirrored desktop of his, the black mirror. And then in the boardroom, we had the massive mirror. And so putting a mirrored headset onto a mirrored table, reflections upon reflections. Yeah, I think, just sort of played dumb with that for a while. But I was so happy with the result.
I mean, I always think that's difficult as a set decorator. If you're doing something futuristic or you're doing Wade's office, there really isn't a lot of detail in the set decoration. It's really mostly about the key elements, and they have to be perfect to sell it, because there's nothing else besides the character and whatever is in there selling it.
Any set is supposed to give you, and obviously, a feeling of, that character. We are all storytellers in our craft, and with Wade, it's one of those, you didn't want to say too much. You don't want to give him any kind of background. You don't want to be, as an audience, work out where he's past it. You want to keep him as this person that is complete mystery. It's always those extreme minimal kind of minimalistic sets, always sometimes the most challenging.
Well, it was incredible. I mean, as was the Kubla Khan set, that set,
Oh,
magnificent.
well, that was great. I mean, in the script, it says the set's called Kubla Khan's Pleasure Dome, and
Right.
it references the Coleridge poem that talks about Kubla Khan. So it's really interesting to try and find Mongolian architecture. I dare anybody find any reference anywhere about Mongolian architecture. It's so difficult. Luckily, our art director, Patsy Johnson, she found a book on Mongolian architecture, and boy, oh boy, did we reference the hell out of that. And originally, it was scripted to be an observation deck, which meant that it was a 360-degree environment. However, visual effects saw the first concepts of that, and they just said there's no way we can afford to do that, because it would have meant, too much rotoscoping of everyone at all times. So then I redesigned it so that it would become a stepped environment and a balcony, so that the actors themselves could be kept in set and in camera. And it worked better for our director, Andrew Stanton, as well, because it positioned the cauldron so that everything seemed like it was being hugged by the set itself.
Did you actually supply the cauldron, or did special effects supply the cauldron?
Nope, no, we had to make it. So again, because obviously there's different shots. There's also that shot where Jin swims down to the bottom and places a hand on the bottom, and we got to be able to feel like the water's starting to boil. So you're having all the little water, like air droplets or air bubbles starting to kind of go through the top. So that was then a separate piece, and then being able to shoot her in the water again, it was another story. So it's, you take the, like we've all done before, it's the half bath kind of scenario to get the shot, but dealing with that size and that pressure, it's a different story altogether.
I did have to ask you too, I really liked, as a decorator, I thought you did a terrific job on UNG's apartment, London apartment. Because to me, it seemed like you really spent a lot of time thinking about her too, and what she would have in her place, now that she's left, nothing and come here, come to London, the Western civilization. I thought you did a great job. I really believed her apartment as well, her house.
We got really lucky with that. We got a really good location. It was so grounded, like in the 70s, it hadn't changed. I mean, it was so bizarre and interesting. I mean, we had to gut everything out. I mean, but there was the bare bones of something to work with, which was, I mean, so it was a good start. Like the fireplace, the stone old fireplace, the bookshelf behind, great. The little window going through to the kitchen. It's all that kind of thing where no one has knocked the walls down and rebuilt it as we always do. But this stayed where it was. But then at the same time, bringing the whole kind of obviously Chinese culture. I mean, Derek, our director for those episodes, was amazing because it's a thing which from a westernized culture, we don't know everything. We don't understand all of that. And he just had, again, so much beautiful information that we could work with and take to the next level. How little offerings bowls work. I mean, what is the process that what fruit is good, what is bad, and each of those meanings and those kind of things, which was great. I think he just added all to it.
I love Jack's house too. It was hilarious. It was so funny, that drum set that went on forever.
That was really fun. I think that was, I mean, like, again, we were working with the character kind of thing, going, well, if you were this carefree, fun kind of guy.
Man-child.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That is now all of a sudden come into money, has no real responsibility, anything. So he went and bought a beautiful house because that's what you're supposed to do when you have lots of money. He's trying to impress the people around him. But at the same time, it's that he has all his stuff and his toys and his collections. And so Deb and I were playing with this idea that, I mean, it's like he found this house, got an interior designer to go and decorate the place, make it all beautiful. And then in the like basically last second, in he comes in with all his stuff, his drum kit, putting in the wrong place. So then you're trying to think about this from, if you were an interior decorator going, oh my God, the horror. I mean, you've had this beautiful place to work with, you've done this beautiful furniture, and all of a sudden you have this client who's asking for the most craziest stuff, and you're trying to do this tastefully, and you try and do something, and then this person will be going, no, make it bigger, make it more elaborate, so this, that. And then same with his bedroom. I mean, it's like, well, I want to have all my toys displayed somewhere, and then trying to work to do, at least try and do something which they would have felt, well, look, at least they gave it a go, and trying to make it at least something a little bit more kind of stylized as such.
So what was your favorite set, Deborah?
Well, I think that the best set that we did, and I think the best work that Andrew did and I did, was China. I think the interior of our control room in China, Andrew, and all of the work that you did to create those consoles and all of that endless research.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, without Chapman, our art director, our Chinese art director, and Adio, our person who was our graphic designer from Hong Kong, we most of this we wouldn't have found. I mean, they are able to research images that we can't find on normal Google, because we obviously trying to write things in English, which just obviously doesn't come up, and they were able to find some incredible images, and that's how we were able to start. I mean, because it wasn't like people went in the 1960s and took films or journalists or took photographs of this and brought it back to the Western world. Just wasn't around. And then the dynamic of how to make this work. I mean, so you go right now, keyboards weren't really around in that time. I mean, with a Mandarin keyboard, I mean, if basic Mandarin, in order to read it like a newspaper, it's between 2,000 to 3,000 characters. I mean, we don't have that in an English alphabet. So, and then how do you portray that into a keyboard? I mean, because that just wasn't around. So it is that, it's that endless amount of work to try and, again, make it real to something that is actually feasible on how they would have done it.
She had that little numeral keypad, and she had a reference book full of characters and words that she would then say, well, for this word, you type this related number. And so that was the system that we ended up using. And so for the iconic shot of her finger hovering over it, that's what you see. And so for something so simple, it required endless problem solving and discussion, and between our Chinese guys and us trying to understand, why it would work, why it didn't work, how, the characters would appear. it was incredibly difficult. And as I say, for something that looks now so simple on screen, and to me looks like it couldn't have been anything else, when I think back to the process, it was very, very difficult. I say it was really important for us to really break down that control room into all of the various machines, and Andrew's team needs such enormous credit for doing that. We had to work out which machines were listening, which machines were decoding, which machines were recording, which machines were responsible for moving the angle of the dish. You know, every part of that room, between Andrew and myself, we understood exactly what each machine was there for. and then we had to instruct the shooting team, the shooting crew, how to shoot in it. Because nobody else knew that space as well as we did. Nobody else knew those machines. So I actually issued a user guide for the space. So in this particular scene, she would be standing here doing this, and then she has to walk to the decoding machine. And she, you know, when she gets that long piece of paper, you know, like we had to map out how that space worked for the shooting crew.
There was so much work. And like Deb said, every single thing, it wasn't just getting an old server and putting it in a corner. It was about understanding what each button does and what each lever does and what everything kind of works. We had to do the internal mechanisms on some of these things because we had different shots at one stage where people had to climb inside, reroute things in terms of her trying to make this a better connection in terms of what she's trying to do. We, like, again, those strange kind of printers, like, again, from a bizarre reference that we managed to get, looking at something which was almost like a ticker tape kind of concept, but that was the printers in the time. And having these, oh my God, I think we had kilometers of paper during the whole, each take completely just flowing out as the old ticker tape machines used to do. I mean, there was so many different dynamics and pieces involved in that, which was, it was amazing. Anna was Eastern European, wonderful drafts lady, and I mean, I kind of threw in the deep end with this whole thing, going, this is what we're going to design, this is what we need, and we she printed full-scale versions of each thing. But again, she was able to take each time we gave an idea, this is what we need. She was able to, with our kind of help and guidance, make logic out of it, like make it into something which is feasible. Because then we were doing little setups of, right, if you're sitting at a desk, what is going to be easy to reach? How do you flick this, do that? And I think outside of our production office, we had each one of these consoles literally down the entire corridor for a very long time. And people would be coming up and down, and we all sitting in little chairs, leaning against the wall with our little kind of paper printouts, playing around how this would work. Oh yes, this is feeling too far away. That should come closer. This is, and that's, that was the dynamic.
I mean, now I do kind of want to skip into the future to talk about, poor Will getting blasted into space. Did you work with NASA on those pieces? Did you work with cryogenics pieces? And you also had that cryogenics chamber with the monkey.
I always loved this space as a comparison to our Chinese version of a similar space. So right. Andrew was responsible for designing a 1960s control room and then a modern day flight control room. It's quite an unbelievable comparison. But the screen graphics were a big deal as well, and how accurate we needed to be with our graphics, and how we would show that Will's brain was going, the trajectory was going off course. How is that illustrated? How do we show that graphically? And our NASA consultant was very helpful with all of that. We did do quite a lot of research with cryogenics in the early days, Andrew, didn't we? Looking at, how the chimp's little chamber would be, and then what the brain canister would be. And then I think we kind of ended up just making it up ourselves. There wasn't any kind of reference that showed what a chimp's cryogenic chamber would look like, or what a brain canister would look like. So this is utterly our invention, as is the little Trollian thing that it would have to wheel in on.
But yes, absolutely. Like Deb's saying, big contrast, from doing a 1960s control room to doing the one that we did, which we were trying to, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were trying to do this more off SpaceX kind of control room. So where it's more kind of digital kind of orientated with servers, and I think we ended up with 81 or 82 screens in that set. So lots and lots of playback. But again, yeah, it needed to be real.
Well, thank you both. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Because those were the things that really stood out for me. And the two of you, I just can't even believe. Are you going to be able to collaborate together on something soon?
God, I hope so. Oh God, I can't. I mean, being with Andrew was like being in driving a McLaren or something. It's all about the people that you meet and you work with, isn't it? It's that's what it is. It's about the teams that you build and what you build together. And yeah, I mean, it always makes me laugh when I look at, when you look at your own work on screen. When I first watched Three Body Problem, I'm not looking at it as a TV show. I'm looking at it like it's some old family film or something. It's like, it's like a holiday that I took once when I was in London. It was so weird, and it's like, oh, Andrew and I were there, and then we did that, and then we did that. It's great.
It is so true. It's exactly right. It's so funny you say that. I mean, I've never actually heard that in words before, but yeah, Deb, that's spot on. People always ask me, why don't you enjoy your own shows? And I said, well, it's kind of like, because you feel like you've watched it 1,000 times, you read it 1,000 times, but you're right. I'm never really watching the show. I'm remembering, oh yeah, it was the horrendous rain on that day, or the flat tire got to work, or whatever it might be. And it's
I
all
remember the good stuff as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. No, it's I think all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it is like Deb was saying, like Susan, it's about the teams around you. And you know what? It's like, yes, there were some very heavy days that we had, but like Deb and I, we had a laugh. We were able to have those times where we can just sit down and just breathe and just laugh about something else and get out for a second and then get back in again. And that is, I mean, like I say, it's those beautiful relationships that you build.
Thank you both so much for sharing this. It was really a joy to both of you. I'm so honored to meet both of you. I think you really blew it out of the water. It's a phenomenal story. It's a phenomenal project, and the sets were they were remarkable.
Oh, that's so kind.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.